When we talk about the web, there are actually two internets. One of them you've used every day for the last 30 years. The other is just being built. The one you used every day, have been using in every function we do. In fact, we're using it right now. Was designed to share information, which is what we're doing. That is what it does well. That is how it changed the world. The one that we're building is designed to carry economic activity, your money, your identity, your sensitive data, your signature on a contract, any of the things that actually we need to protect, and their uniqueness is important. These are things, therefore, that must not be copied. They cannot be duplicated. You know, a payment that's duplicated is not a payment, it's an error. So everything you've ever done with your bank, your card, your online identity has been running on the wrong one of those two internets. It's been running on the internet of data because it's what we knew. And rather than create something that actually solved for what we needed, we instead patched it. And that's essentially what's been going on all of this time. 2 weeks ago, an AI model called Mythos was released by Anthropic. Sorry, forgive me, not released. It was announced by Anthropic. They actually haven't released it because they discovered that it could hack every single access point going for everything, whether that was your bank transfer login, your bank account login, security access to a building. All of these things became hackable almost instantaneously in seconds with Mythos, which is why they put a pause on its release. So the cybersecurity industry, of course, continues to talk about spending more money, more layered defense, more defense in depth, as they put it. But actually, that's because they're still trying to protect the wrong thing. The wrong thing is to have that information in the public domain in the first place. That's the mistake. So where we set about looking at this was that, first off, GRIDS solved this problem. GRIDS is the Gajumaru Remote Instruction Dispatch Serialization, architected by Craig Everett, the Chief Product Officer of QPQ, who's with me now from Japan. And what it does is it disintermediates the two things. It says, if you are signing into a secure portal, you don't actually give a login and password that can be hacked. You provide a secure authentication cryptographic code from one to the other, a key from public key A to public key B. What that then does is allows you to log in securely. This is what I was demonstrating in the videos last week, that I could log into Gaju Mining, I could log into Gaju Market, I could do actions in there, again, authenticating that it is indeed me, and I want to do that authentication in order to confirm that the transaction or the login should go ahead. And it's a one-time deal. You don't continually stay logged in on that login and password. It's unique to each time you do it. That removes the attack vector that Mythos attacks completely. The attack surface is gone. It's not that you've increased the security, you've just removed the sensitive data from needing to be protected at all. This morning, I was doing a transaction to buy my wife a new phone cover because hers broke. When I went to the end of the process, it struck me how stupid it was that I had to trust all the people involved that I've never met, never dealt with, never done business with before. I have no track record with them. I have no knowledge of them really, other than the fact that they have physical stores in Ireland. So I figured there must be some substance to them. And I'm handing these people my credit card details to pay for this mobile phone cover. It's 16 euros and 90 something cents. And it just struck me how insane this is and how silly it is. A 3DS didn't come through asking me to confirm that I wanted to do the transaction, perhaps because it was such a small transaction, but often as not they do. And again, layers of, do I really want you knowing all these things about me? This is insane. Why isn't GRIDS working in this as well? Alongside which, I've spent the last week trying to communicate what people need to understand about Mythos, what people need to understand about the attack surface that it presents to, it attacks, and explaining that in a way that people from different industries could see where the solution sits and how they could integrate grids into their workflows, into their systems, and remove the threat vector completely. So going down this rabbit hole, I started thinking about, well, hey, you could replace 3DS with grids. And oh, if you replace 3DS with grids, you could actually go much further, because then the question comes, why are you using a credit card at all? Could it not be something that binds to your wallet that can work with the existing systems? And again, coming back to something that's a consistent thread in everything we've done in the Gajumaru, which is separating issues and concerns. So the argument I've been making for 25 years to financial institutions is you will make more money with less risk by focusing on your USP and not on all the things that you do to deliver that USP. All of those infrastructures are not an asset. They are, in fact, a liability. And that was when I then said, I'll contact Craig. And before I get any deeper into this rabbit hole of wonder and fantastic new good idea fairy trips, that I would do a kind of a sense check and say, okay, you're the architect. What happens where, when? And start with a quick run through of what GRIDS does, how it works, and what the purpose and object is, and how that can then translate to these other things, please.
Okay, sure. Fundamentally, GRIDS is a way to communicate out of band with a signature device. In this case, Gaju Desk or Gaju Mobile. What's great about that is that it lets us completely separate the signature context from whatever execution context is going on. The web, where we use browsers and Chrome and Firefox and all that, it is just a nightmare of problems. And the only correct way to cope with all the limitless number of unknowable, it's not unknown, it's just unknowable how many there are, security vulnerabilities, is to just separate the context. Like, let it be understood that this is an unsafe context. Well, how do I never let my keys be exposed to that context? You should remove the signature context from that execution context, which we know is really dangerous. So that, the easiest code to secure is the code that you don't have. The easiest part to fix is the part that you don't need to have in your system. So just removing the scary stuff, as much of the scary things as we can from the situation, is always the best solution. And GRIDS lets us communicate out of band with a signature device, so we can give it an instruction, and that instruction can be to perform a specific action or to request a message from a specific endpoint that we can verify, and then prompt the user for an action based on that message. That's if you're a networking guy or whatever, doesn't sound all that complicated. It's the magical matching of this technique with this particular context that makes it really useful. So the idea that you're going to expose your credit card details to just some website because you need to buy a phone cover, that's pretty crazy in 2026. Like, I would have thought that we would have solved that problem. Like, I can't believe we have credit card numbers, actually. That's really
okay. It's one of your bugbears. Why do we still have emails?
Yeah.
Because actually, when you think it through, social media, emails, credit cards, all of it should relate back to a single public key that is yours, from which you
Or a set of
do
them,
all of your
yeah.
communication. Oh, a set of them, sure, but they are public keys that are yours and that have these things embedded into them. Have
It's a
the
much
routing
stronger
already
ID.
inside.
It's even outside of this idea of like, well, national ID systems and all that. Like, you wind up getting into sort of a rose by any other name type problem. The real question that you care about on the internet is not what someone's national ID card says. What you care about is repeated interactions with that person or entity. Is it always the same one or not? That's what you really care, because you build up a history of interaction. And so you build up a history of trust through all these trust signals. Whole social mechanisms are there that humans have evolved for, millennia to get right. And with the internet, we don't know if, okay, I've interacted with this person 50 times and, we're on good terms. The next time might be an imposter, and you don't have a good way to know whether or not that's true. That's why account hacking can be so, well, often funny, but often pretty devastating too. Um, that's if someone gets a hold of your, let's say you do a lot of business through a social media account and somebody gets into your account, it's not you, that can start really wreaking havoc, sometimes on your whole life. And the problem is not, uh, social media per se is not necessarily a problem. The idea of communicating on the internet is not specifically the main problem. The problem is that we've done all this. We invented all these ways to communicate back in, like, well, not all these ways, but we invented a lot of ways to communicate like this. This concept came around in, the ARPANET days, when it was like a defense network and all the scientists knew each other. And so, of course, sending a message is just, it's part of the project, no big deal. Um, Finding ways to secure that, whoa, like retrofitting security is always really bad.
It was
Um,
never designed to be secured. It was always
Not in
designed
that
to
way,
be,
no.
yeah, yeah. And this is, so we've replaced letters with emails. And the
Right.
problem there is that a letter, it's handwritten, or at least there's a signature on it.
Yeah.
Um,
Often you can
there's,
smell the guy's hand, be like, oh, I know, I know
yeah,
what house this came from because their house smells a certain way.
yes, or indeed you'd have back in the day when I was in boarding school, a young lady writing a letter to you tended to douse
Oh
the
yeah.
letter in a bit of perfume.
Oh, when I was in the army,
And
that was like
yeah,
the only
that was the
morale
letter
you
you
had.
wanted to get.
Yeah, that
So
was the letter. That's where you're waiting for mail day.
yeah, 100%. Not the one that smelt of your mum's perfume, but the one that smelt of some fair rose and a distant
Oh
shore.
yeah, make all your
Um,
buddies jealous.
anyway, yeah, we had all these ways of knowing that something was somebody. I mean, for example, I always used to my father used to write a letter to me every week in boarding school, and I always knew it was him, and not just the stamp. I mean, my point is there were so many points of authentication. There was his
Hmm.
handwriting on the front of the envelope. The fact the stamp came from Saudi Arabia. Um,
Hmm.
all of these things told you, yeah, that's a letter from my dad. It is genuinely my father because that's his handwriting. I know it. I'm one of the few people in the world who can read it at any speed, um, and so on.
Hmm.
Uh, when you started to strip away those things and you had something as anonymous as email, how do I know you are you? How do I authenticate that you are you? I had this problem earlier today. This guy contacted me on X, wanting to know about mining, says he runs a mining operation in Poland. I said, yeah, look, I'm very happy to share some information with you, but I don't know who you are because you're not verified on X, and
Hmm.
I don't see your LinkedIn profile. So would you mind authenticating who you are somewhere else and messaging me so I know you are you? And the guy got into a rage and told me to go to hell. So I did. Um,
Hmm.
no, look, in an era where there are, you were talking about spear phishing with AI, it's going to get really, really big.
Spearfishing with AI, and now that we have these like local run, agents and access to LLMs that you can easily stock with, black market purchase private data from any number of data breaches, which are probably going to accelerate soon. Well, they've already been accelerating.
Well, the
Um,
Mythos point is going to be that there will be nothing but a sea of compromised data for us to be compromised
right. So
by.
when you couple that with, not people trying to shortcut some work, but genuine miscreants using things like OpenClaw to automate extremely carefully targeted, you're totally going to believe that your grandmother just got sick and wrote you an email. Like, you're 100% going to believe that because all the cues
Well,
that you could possibly convey in bits is going to be there.
okay, so an interesting segue. I've only ever been caught out once by this. And I'm always telling people to check these things. When you get an email from a company, whether you deal with them or not, most often if you do, you need to check that it's actually them who emailed you, not blah@gmail.com.
Hmm.
That they use a pseudonym that you see in the from line in your email, which is a major problem in how emails work. They shouldn't do that at all. They should
Hmm.
force that you can only be seen as your actual address. Anyway, the point
Right.
is,
You get to the reply to the sneaky reply to headers and all that, where it's like, really, really, I promise this is Craig at totally the real company dot blah 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 dot cn.
correct.
It's like,
And then,
huh?
so what happened was I received an email allegedly from Spotify. It had all the Spotify headings. It looked exactly like a Spotify email.
Mm-hmm.
So exactly that I could, when I checked back later, I looked at an actual email from Spotify and an email from them, and I couldn't tell the difference. Put
Mm-hmm.
them up side by side on the screen and went, Jesus, I really, apart until I went and checked who the message was actually from, I couldn't have checked.
This is
So what
also
happened
why I
was,
hate HTML email.
well, I'll tell you the rest of the story. So I had literally just changed banks, and I had made a point of changing my credit card just about everywhere. But one that I there's always going to be one or two that you miss. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought maybe I had missed the Spotify subscription because the email said your credit card payment has bounced. Please update your credit card details.
Right.
This was in the week that I had been doing this with everybody else. So I faithfully put in my details. It then asked me for another piece of information, which I began to think, well, why do you need to know my date of birth? Um, that's pretty irrelevant to you. So um, at that stage, I left it blank. It demanded that I put the data in. And then I thought, is this some sort of KYC thing that I didn't know about? Oh, damn it, it probably is. And I was in a rush trying to do other things. So I hit OK. I put the details in, I hit OK. And it then asked me for more. I thought, okay, now you're definitely smelling. This isn't good. And
Mm-hmm.
I rang my Visa card issuer at the bank and said, please cancel my cards. I appreciate it. I've only been with you for a wet week, but I've already screwed up. So please cancel all my cards. And all of the processes that the email did and how it presented. For example, it said from accounts at spotify.com. It wasn't. That was just,
Make a display name or
that was a
the
display
from.
name. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to click, and I've always said to people, click in and check that the from is consistent, is correct. But I missed it. I was under pressure for time, wasn't paying attention, made the stupid mistake, made the second stupid mistake, thinking that my initial instinct was wrong because maybe something has changed in our ever growing list of KYC demands for everybody that you deal with.
That's another problem.
Yeah. And hey presto, I've obviously had somebody steal my credit card. So, and the thing is, I'm a nerd. So if it can happen to me, it's no wonder that it happens to so many other people everywhere else because they don't know what these things happen. So it comes back to, as you said a moment ago, where you look at where all of this started was in a group of people who all knew each other, or at least knew
Right.
of each other.
Mm-hmm.
In a great big world in which we really want to be sure that you are you and I am me, your birth certificate, passport, driving license, and address don't actually really solve that for me. They merely tell me that there are some documents that relate to a person who may or may not be you.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and there's ways to spoof those personas as well. And we're about to enter a new exciting era, depending on your where you lean on these things. The combination of vibe coding and automated crack exploits, um, kind of the whole snowball. Uh, you're going to start getting actually a real email from really Spotify and their vibe coded back end. The AI that produced the crappy code that they just like copy pasted in there is going to have in it a filter that checks if it's a response from one of their spam emails that was sent out that these guys don't even know about. And that whole back end, the scam back end is going to be in their infrastructure. They won't know it. That's going to happen. So just checking that it came from Spotify is not going to be good enough. There's going to be cracks where the whole back end has been cracked and it is actually running an automated scam that they don't know about and emitting data through some side channel somewhere. That's going
But
to become a thing.
ultimately, this all comes down to the fact that we are conflating all of these pieces. We're conflating all of these things. And actually, they as an entity should stand alone, and you or I as an entity should stand alone. And we should each be able to say, okay, so I'm going to log into my client area on your website. How I me logging in with anything that can be used again is insane.
Yes.
Because all I have to do, all somebody has to do is capture the information that I use to log in with you, and they've got everything they need. And very often that becomes a snowball because if they get access to my email, they get access to my phone, they get access to my bank account. There's all sorts of things they can then authenticate on the back of that because these things are then layered one into the other. For example, I want to change my password. Oh, okay, authenticate to your email. Great. I already compromised the guy's email, so I'll just get the change of password and put it in.
Well, even beyond that, we've got Peter Harperding and I have talked about this in the past before. It's one of these uncomfortable things people don't want to think is true, but um, whether or not it's behaving as the greatest man in the middle attack possible right now, it can if it's compromised. Things like Cloudflare, AWS, and so on. There's not necessarily any way to check whether or not they're acting in your interest, for one thing, uh, because capacity drives intent. So that's kind of a tricky one by itself. And second, that they know whether or not their system is secure. They don't necessarily know that for sure. We've seen that just recently. I mean, that's why we've had Cloudflare outages recently, as they've been vibe coding. So we know that's pretty safe. Um, and we have the problem that certificate authorities, the motivation to compromise any what. So if you compromise a single CA certificate authority, you've compromised all of them because that the way that system works. And we're pretending that DNS is secure, and it's not. There's no actual way to really secure DNS. Um, so there's kind of layers to this problem where we're depending on a lot of very opaque things. The actors involved, it's impossible that at least one of them doesn't have some motives that aren't the ones I state. Um, I think the Snowden disclosure should have put the final. I don't know. That was the anvil that broke the camel's back. If you were still living in the world where any of that was safe. But we didn't change anything. We didn't fix anything. I mean, what cloud provider has an incentive to fix a microcode bug if the problem is that some microcode optimization that makes things run 60% faster actually opens up a memory, a secure memory reading vulnerability, and the user can't tell that they're being compromised, right? The people that are running their things in their cloud environment, they can't tell if private memory is being read. So are you going to go add 60% more hardware to your whole data center operation as a cloud provider? No, of course you're not. You're going to tell everybody that you patched it, but they have no way to check. So like, where's the incentive? It's kind of the joke that like, don't ever update anything. And then the security guy says, but then the viruses, but the viruses, they're already here and they're not hurting anybody except for the customers, and they already paid. So screw them. Just never update anything. That's kind of the mentality. It's very easy to evolve that mentality. If especially if you start running on thin margins, things are complicated. It's hard to keep up with things, and um, then you start getting overwhelmed by just the vibe coded garbage of the world, and you just give up and say, you know what, they're throwing bags of money at us. Let's just take the money and just not look.
Yeah,
And
look,
that's what they do.
this is I remember talking to a consultant from one of the big names in technical consulting. I won't name them because this was a private conversation. And he showed me a map of how, and South Africa had a very advanced banking system from comparing to most places because they had the whole apartheid era and they had to build everything themselves from scratch, and they actually did a pretty good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was showing me a map of how somebody who was a customer of a large bank in South Africa would gain not would log into their bank and then ask a very simple question. how much money is in my account right now. And he showed me the network map. 27 different servers had to be polled to facilitate those two extremely simple processes. And most of them, they were black box, a little bit like you've just said, because the guy who designed the system in 1995 is probably retired or dead.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
but that system did something once upon a time, and nobody really knows or understands what it did once upon a time. Nobody's qualified in the language that it's written in anymore. And so they black box it and say, do not touch, a little bit like you just said. Yes, there are bugs in the system, but there are bugs.
Hmm. Right. But it there's an emotional appeal to that, the ability to say, but there are bugs, but it's not quite the same as saying, yeah, he's an idiot, but he's our village idiot.
Yeah.
Is the different thing, right? And we're extending this human sympathy to like something that's just a machine, which is that's a different layer of like psychological problem, which is about to get really bad because we have people anthropomorphizing like AIs now that are hallucination engines, and they're like, "Oh, my AI got mad at me." It's like, no, no, it didn't. That's not how this works. But that's autocomplete on steroids. It's amazing how fast people's brains can get one-shotted by like Clippy Plus, which is kind of what we've got running amok now.
Well,
Um,
hold on. I have to take you back a second because I had an argument with Grok a little while ago.
mhm,
Um, because I said something that was un-PC, and Grok insisted that I had to be wrong.
mhm,
So I pressed the pedal of logic hard to show it why I was actually correct. And it still couldn't, it could accept the logical reasoning for why I was correct, but essentially said something your mother might say, which is, but it was mean to say that.
mhm. Right. But that's
But
again, though, that's
that's not it being a person. That's
no.
the person who programmed it has very set political views, and you trampling with hate speech, logic, and reason over those political views is unacceptable, and that is built into the programming of Grok even. Never mind ChatGPT or Gemini, where it'll get truly hilarious and they'll probably directly report you to the thought police.
Well, there's two layers to that. You can have like sort of trapdoor like gates in the model that oh, we've hit this topic and that topic is flagged as whatever, and that's the thing that happens. The other thing that happens is that the training data, uh, a lot of it's coming from places like Reddit, which we know is a um, clearly a bastion of free speech. Totally lets any view go. But the sum of training data there indicates that the completion for the thing that you just wrote is this like really annoying response, and it will give you that really annoying response because that's the highest probability across the training set is this like corny stuff. So you don't even need to have the system engineers pushing a specific agenda to get crazy stuff out of it, especially now that AIs are ingesting about half their training data comes from other AIs. And so whatever the big signal is just gets amplified more and more. And you wind up with like, you eventually get to nonsense, which is kind of, I don't know. We're in a really interesting time right now, but this is a very unsustainable time. They talk about sustainability all the time. They don't forget about this form of it, how fragile the AI, like if the human economy hits even the slightest bump, there's just not going to be any AI. Because we can't, there's no way to keep the lights turned on for that. Um, at, at the kind of scale that you would need to do what we're doing right now. Anyway, back to
Well,
the
it's not in any way. I mean, ultimately, this stuff is actually pretty fundamental, and
mhm,
we've often talked in the past about how if there will always be a market for custody, there will always be a market for the passage of risk and responsibility.
mhm,
By which I mean, you and I might be perfectly comfortable using our own wallet, uh, everything self-hosted, self-responsibility, but we probably make up 1 to 2% of the population. Most people
Right.
want to be able to pick up the phone and say, I forgot my password, or
Oh yeah, totally. And
uh, my dog
that's
ate
where, I
my
mean,
mail.
this kind of comes for full circle where like this idea of why do we have credit card numbers at all today? It's a little silly that we do. Well, what's the alternative to that? Card companies tried in the past to do this, the chip signature thing, and they were going to phase out card numbers. But then online commerce winds up being this very dominant force, and there's no way to get everybody on board with buying the USB reader thing for your card and like setting up browser plugins so that the web shop can understand the signature thing. All that stuff exists, but outside of a pretty specialized context, that nobody uses them because they're annoying and error prone. It's user error prone. So it's hard to get set up if you're not already familiar with these things. So that just never took off. So now we have like both and neither. And we just still have credit. Well, we just still have credit card numbers floating around. So um, the key point of that transaction, like when I authorize a credit card transaction, the service provider and the issuing bank and the credit card net, the funds transfer network and all, that's what actually goes into motion, and it's all on my behalf. The important point is whether or not I authorize that action. And that's the whole point of like getting 3DS involved, is to, okay, well, this credit card number, but is that really the guy that is connected to this credit card number? They're trying to establish that.
So
We can,
when I was thinking this through, the first thing that I thought about was, so from trying to think, how would I communicate this to the existing world in a way that
mhm,
they would grasp? Um, I knew that me saying, hey, you know what, credit cards are actually a really dumb idea. You should have this public key like this, and that would be somewhere I could go to in time, but it definitely wasn't
mhm.
where I could start. So I had to
Right.
start with something that was an existing pain point that could be understood by anybody in the audience, whether that audience is industry or it's an individual. And the bit that I saw the closest analogy to how you could have something that works in the process as grids was 3DS.
Right. So the whole, like the 3DS thing and the ACS service, whatever behind it, and um, that's all operated by the same stack of service providers that make the credit card system work at all. And it's a way for them to defend against fraud as opposed to being a thing that makes them any money. And as such, it's a cost that they could get rid of if they begin migrating with a fourth option, which is, public key signatures, because everybody has these, everybody has Gajumaru or the ability to get it really easily. And it does a lot of different things, not just this one thing. Getting people to get a one-off app is a little bit hard. Getting them to have an app that does a bunch of different stuff that's more broadly useful, that's a lot easier of a sell. Um, so giving them a way to, like, we can provide an option that doesn't destroy what you're doing right now, but it augments it and provides you eventually an out from this costly system that you're stuck into right now, while their main that whole structure's main value add that they should focus on is the fraud prevention piece. Um, and there's ways to slide into that later on. But they can keep doing what they're doing now with this cost reducing option, which opens the door for better things later on. But the whole point behind this is that using a signature that's requested by grids can sidestep the problem of having dangerous data out there in the world at all. And the more prolific that is, the more recommended that is to vendors, the better things are. And if you are able to take those instances of authorizing a signature for a specific action and put those on a public ledger as a data entry, now you've got sequence verification, in sequence verification that the user can check, everybody can check. You don't have to see what the details were of what happened, but you can see that a thing happened. And there's various ways we can anonymize that and all that. And um, this winds up being kind of like, in the short term, the very near term goal is to get rid of this requirement that everybody has to expose credit cards for silly reasons.
I think so. It's interesting because if you go into the rabbit hole of 3DS and you think, okay, so how could grids replace that? Or at least this was my mental flow this morning. How could grids replace that? Well, it would do you'd fit it here, and then it would. I was trying to think of the process from a card issuer's perspective, from a payment service provider's perspective. What is it that they're getting? What is it that they're losing? What is the benefit to them? Or alternatively, what is it that they lose that they don't want to lose? For example, it's a revenue stream. Um, and ultimately, 3DS, so when it goes off on my phone, it will ask me to confirm a transaction is me. And on some of them, not all of them, it will do a 3D, it'll do a confirmation of my face. Like Revolut, for example, will ask me to say, yes, it's me, and then ask to confirm biometrically that I am me. Okay.
mm-hmm.
That's not actually necessarily part of 3DS, I don't think. I think that's specific to something they do with the secure enclave of the phone, which is where my visual identity is held.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then you go a step beyond that. You think, okay, well, look, 3DS would certainly it does a thing in this process. Maybe that's where grids can replace that and create a heightened level of security. But actually, the bit that you really need to get to is where you've just gone, which is yes, all good and well, but actually, the thing that we shouldn't have, just as we don't want logins and passwords in the public domain, which is what they will be in 3 to 9 months from now. Effectively, every login, every password is going to be in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want credit cards in the same vein. We need them to come out of the public domain and that they be something that I can authenticate, I wish to do, to utilize. So this is where we tie them into the public key.
Right. Yeah. The public key and having, um, I mean, this is still in the realm of the fiat system that exists. Taking what they have right now, don't tell them you have to get rid of it all. Tell them we can do this better, and we can, you know, we can help you do this better, but it's not a one-off. It's an entryway into something much better, which is a much bigger cost reduction over time, and helping them get into a place where they can focus on the big value add that they provide instead of having to be an expert in 15 different things like they're having to do right now. Um, and that does get more into, like, Gajumaru and the reason that the structure works the way it does and all that. But there's a short term win that's unequivocally a win, but it's the kind of win that's it's a seg into something better over the long term. It's instead of just being a one off, which is kind of what the let's do the chip signature thing. That's was kind of a one off. Like, how do we just solve this one problem? And then that didn't even work out. But instead, we can fix that problem, and the follow on keeps getting better over time. So I think this is a lot better. It's hard to, I don't know, find the right words to kind of, I guess, pitch. We need to maybe, um,
Look, I know exactly where you're going. I mean, this is the conversation I had in the boardrooms of Barclays, HSBC, Royal Bank of Scotland, and Bank of Scotland 25 years ago. And
mhm,
what I said at the time is, look, guys, digitalization is going to end the game that you're currently playing. The game you're currently playing is you have a ton of infrastructure, and
mhm,
you think that infrastructure is your asset, and your plan is to extract value from rent from the operation of that infrastructure by your clients, and then to be able to sell them value additive services on top of that, where you actually make really good money. But the majority of the stuff is tight, thin margins, and let's be honest, this was true. This is as true now as it was then. The banking system is systemic only in its risk. There's nothing
mhm.
systemic about the banking system. Most of it is, as I described 2 years ago in a similar conversation between you and I, it's back office people essentially being the boy sticking his finger into the hole in the dam. all over the place all day long.
Right.
And it's insane how much of the workload is still being done by that. The assumption that that can be done with AI, by the way, you want to talk about putting AI into the wrong
Ooh.
context, is
Yeah.
wild. The idea that you can say, well, hold on, there's only so many cases that tend to happen in this regard. So if we just program it to do this, but you're assuming that it doesn't hallucinate. This is again my issue with the cybersecurity industry's response to Mythos is, oh, we'll just get some more AI. And it's like, but guys, you do understand that the more AI can hallucinate. And while it's okay to hallucinate and fail as an attacker, it is not okay to hallucinate and fail as a defender, because that's
Mhm.
it. You're compromised, you're dead, you're gone.
Yeah.
For
It's
those who like cricket, the batsman can never miss. The bowler can miss all day. He only has to hit the stumps or force the batsman to make a bad selection in his shot selection once. This is why batsmen tend to be the ones that are celebrated, because they're the ones who cannot be wrong. If they're wrong, they're out. And this is the
right.
same for this. So, um, yeah, the argument that I tried to make to the guy from MasterCard at Point Zero Forum last year was, look, a lot of what you do is actually this colossal infrastructure. It's super expensive to maintain. It has so
Mhm.
many complexities to it. If you used a common open framework that you build from scratch today, you can actually get rid of so many of those issues within that system and focus on where your real USP is, which is fraud prevention and fraud detection,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is what you were getting to. And I think that's the kind of conversation we need to have with people, is understand that capitalism is not about the aggregation of control and the extraction of rent from control. That's corporatism, and it's a different way of operating. Capitalism
Mhm.
is you add value and you get paid for the value you add. But that also means that you probably make a lot more money because you're no longer having to constrain everybody else from how
Mhm.
to make money.
Yeah, because they can focus on actually what, you know, they can, I guess they can rediscover what their core business really is. They're so wrapped up and like, it's funny how you can, once operations kind of takes over your business, you're no longer driving your business anymore. And you're not trying to create success anymore because you've already got some of that. You're just trying to not create failure, and any change feels risky. But I think the biggest, I mean, the belief that you're going to be able to outrun, digital currency changes, that's silly. The idea that like things that can't go on forever eventually stop. That's just a baseline rule. Um, Now the world's a pretty irrational place quite often, but it just is a fundamental. Um, we're working in this space where things eventually have to move regardless. But it's very uncomfortable being where we're at right now because it's hard to none of this like we're having a hard time finding a way because everything's connected to everything. It's hard to find a good way to collapse a story down to a single proposition sometimes. And so having these conversations to kind of figure that out is important. Um, and sometimes it's hard to, you know, find the way to chop the story down just to the proposition for a specific target use. But this is a pretty clear one. Like bottom line, letting credit card numbers run around the world is insane. Let's stop doing that. This is a way to stop doing that. And it has a long tail. Um, I guess that's the coupling. We can get rid of credit card numbers using the same service that's being provided now. And this particular form of that transition has a very good long tail. Those would be the points that I would want to be able to convey. Uh, the details of it, yeah, it's this thing that we have called grids. This is the system that we have to implement that and all that. But that system is sort of the gateway to this bigger thing that comes later that you definitely want to be a part of. And we would like them to be a part of because they're experts in fraud prevention and we're not. And it'd be great to have them around. So um, those are, I don't know how to put that into a deck because I'm not a business guy. But
It's really hard.
yeah,
I've been
that's it
look.
is.
No, honestly, I've been trying to do this for since the Mythos, so basically my workflow in terms of things I had to get out that were in my stack was number one, I had to get I'm still working through all the chapters of the unwhite paper that need to go in there. So the one I was going to get to next was the layer ones. And the test I have for layer ones, the sixth form test I have for layer ones to determine how they fit with things. I really wanted to push the T aspect, trustlessness, efficiency, accountability. Either you're trustless or you're not. If you're not, you've compromised for efficiency. If you have efficiency, you must have some accountability. Oh, you're a layer one, therefore you have none. That's the entire point. Got it.
Mhm.
So I was working through all those things. I was also trying to look at fundraising, how we can regain some momentum with Gaussian mining sales. And then Anthropic came out with the news that they're going to cut off OpenClaw. I think I'm not going to say the number. There's some absolutely huge number of people who have been using OpenClaw, and there's a factor on top of that of the number of people, of the number of machines running this. So one of the
Mhm.
reasons you can't buy an Apple Mini Mac right now without sitting on a waiting list for 8 to 10 weeks is because all the people buying these things are running them on Mac Minis, Mac Mini M4, the very thing that we were recommending to everybody to mine on. Similar, they're actually a great little piece of hardware, and they have all the software you need built in. They're good. So what happened was Anthropic said, okay, look, these guys are actually using about $5,000 worth of compute, and we're only being paid $200 for it. Unlike sorry, I should never call it OpenAI because it's not open. It's very opaque and it's very dark. But let's go with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT can continue to pretend that these issues of compute cost versus revenue don't exist because they got a 300 billion subsidy for their compute cost from Oracle.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, this is the classic Silicon Valley model, by the way. Make it so hard for anybody to compete with you that the gulf is just an enormous wedge of money. And even if they do compete with you, you have the too big to fail argument down the road, which is just about where WeWork went, by the way. They were looking for bailouts in various places too. Anyway, by the by, the wonders of the corporatist machine and the cheek they have to call themselves venture capitalists. That is almost as objectionable as open AI. Anyway, I actually saw this in two lights. Number one, I thought this is an industry coming of age because they're realizing that they have to make money. They can't just continue to burn shareholder value. And two, and I appreciate that Amazon proved that you can continue to raise money ad nauseum for a long time, but I think there was a bigger picture plan that Bezos and co managed to convey to shareholders through that process, which is a slightly different
Mhm.
thing. But anyway, I digress. Um, with that maturity, that if we sell you $200 worth of compute per month, we would really like that to only cost us something like $50 to $180. When it's costing us 5,000, that's no good. So we're going to move to a model where you will connect your API and we will actually bill you for everything that goes through. And as you and I know, there's no way of that working with the existing
Mhm.
fiat systems, doesn't work with stable coins, doesn't work with any of it. It's the idea that any of this can actually fulfill the demands of the machine economy is, as I put it, the last wheezes of the corporatist system trying to get their pension plan topped up.
Mhm. Yeah, there is no, we have, well, I say there's no, we have, uh, I think actually nobody's implemented this but us. So we have the
The
solution to that.
no, it is the only because
Yeah.
you need it to be money. So
Yeah.
we that's
Some
a key issue,
foundational problems exist, as
right?
technology aside.
And then once you get through all those points, you then have to come to, and do you have state channels that can operate on a genuine proof of work resource layer? Yes or
Do
no?
you have state
If no,
channels that exist outside of just a document repo? Because nobody went to it's pretty hard to do them right. It's surprisingly hard to do them right, and you don't know that until you try it. And so everybody's like, "Well, we'll just talk about it instead of do it."
Right.
And then Ulf
And
is over there not realizing that's the game, and he actually did them.
yeah, so the we have the solution to unlock the machine economy, not machines, the machine economy. And
Mm-hmm.
so that immediately caught my attention that I was like, okay, so there's hundreds of millions of Claude bots in operation. These should all be miners. What they can do is they can mine Gajus. As they're mining Gajus, they're essentially covering their cost of operation to run this economy, which would be anything like, for example, a search. So I want to know if there's a coffee shop near me who serve bagels.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't be something that I give to Google, who then send advertisements back to me and send me to a coffee shop 5 miles down the road because they paid more to be at the top of the list. That should be
Mm-hmm.
information that I actually receive that is accurate and I pay for. This is the thing about Web3. It's not all the stuff you've been told. It's very simple. Web3 is the world in which you do not give the world your information. Instead, you pay for services, utility, as you use it, as you find it, as you use it. So this could be absolutely tiny little payments that need to happen
Oh yeah,
extremely quickly
we
between points.
we could actually like we could actually that like this works so well that we could actually have charges per token. Like we could rate per
Yeah.
token.
Well,
That's how fine
I
grained
gave the
this can
example
be.
of Uncle Buck when we were talking about this on a team chat, and you said, well, actually, there's no reason why, as you're streaming Uncle Buck, you're not paying per kilobyte.
Yeah, or per keyframe. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could literally charge per like that's the model people had in mind before, which was like, oh, I want to micropayments mean that I should be able to click per page going through a website, but actually the entire like web model is backwards. We should be charging up front for broadcasting data. This is the only thing that'll save AI from itself, by the way. AI is going to run itself into the ground because the subsidy can't go on forever unless you want to hyperinflate the whole economy for AI's sake, which is stupid.
Hold on, but they do. Good old Elon has
Well,
come out, and I'm normally a fan, but now he's come out saying we should just turn everybody into slaves because he's an advocate for very generous. What was the phrase
people will
again?
say that he said that,
Universal
but
show. No, he did. He did on Twitter. He promoted the idea that we should have a very generous universal social income scheme. To which my response was, "That's called slavery, Elon." Um,
well,
but
especially
anyway,
if you more
digress.
properly define slavery as a state of dependency instead of servitude, which is the more accurate definition. People don't like when I say that because they haven't thought through it yet, but that's really it.
Facts hurt.
Um, yeah, well, yeah, that one stings a little, but the uh, the realities of the fact that this is not unlocking an unlimited uh, production machine. Like that whole idea comes on the back of this of what I believe is a delusion that we've got some interesting tools, but no tool yet has been so good that it's a perpetual motion machine. And so UBI doesn't work. You're just always going to have scarcity. That's just how it is. Um, the So in that vein, we should be charging for broadcasting data as opposed to trying to monetize the view. Now you can also monetize a view, something you can't do that, but you have to charge rather than subsidize the broadcast of information because it's so easy now when it was limited by people typing on keyboards, like how much junk went out, um, you could kind of overlook it. But now we're at the point where you can just crank up millions of models to just dump junk to the point that's why I said email. One of the reasons I was saying all the public free to post services, image boards, forums, email, anything like that's going to become unusable soon because if as long as we're subsidizing this, it's going to become unusable because it's too easy to just dump junk and then reshape all the narratives around whoever's got more money to dump junk. If you charge teeny tiny fractions, it'd be like if you charged a half a
No,
penny for every email sent, spam would be
let's
impossible to do.
let's look at it in the context of a Gajumaru transaction. On a Gajumaru
Mhm.
transaction, when you enter it in, you have to say how long you want this to maintain for,
Right.
and you pay for it. You will
Then you
pay
pay,
for
yeah.
it right then. So
Yeah.
if I
So like
say I want to send Craig a message and I want it to stay on chain for 50 years, it's not going to be a simple spend transaction fee. It's going to be quite a big fee because I've got to
yeah.
pay for that data to be held for all of that period.
Yeah,
Now,
that
this
one
is
would
this
hurt.
is a grown-up behavior. So let's
Yes.
take a look at the platform that we're on. This is going to go out on YouTube. There
Mhm.
is it how many is it quintillions of hours of video on YouTube? I think
I
it is. It's into the quintillions
it,
of hours
it
of
would have
video,
to be. Yeah. It's gonna be something silly. It
which
like
is all stored on databases, and the majority of it is complete rubbish.
mhm.
So take us as an example. We're going to put this out. I think we have about 200 subscribers on our channel. So we might get 100 views, maybe 150 views in the immediacy. But as a company wanting to get these ideas into the world, and YouTube having a good search algorithm that works off the content of the video very, very well,
Mhm.
we would be willing to pay to put that video on YouTube if they asked.
Mhm. But they
Makes
they
sense
don't.
to
They
do
have
so. And eventually, if it gets to the point where people say, oh, we must go back and look at what these guys said way back when, or this could be
mhm.
an interesting exercise, then we might actually get our money back. But actually, where we really succeeded was in getting ideas that we have out into the world. Because just side topic, we put the unwhite paper out and a few articles by you and by Peter, and you said that the LLMs were going mad for our data because it's all
Mhm.
new. It's something
Yeah,
they've never
yeah.
seen before.
Yeah, so yeah, the perplexity score of our content was very, very high, and then the cluster of the topical clustering of everything that crosses, even going into like personal sites across to the company stuff. There's a tight cluster because we've all been thinking and working roughly in the space for a while, so our personal lives and our work lives are all kind of squished together. But that's formed a cluster naturally, and so if one of us says something over here and then there's a relationship to that over here, um, that that strengthens the cluster. But we have a very high like authority score and a very high perplexity score because we don't use like we're not using LLMs to write our stuff. We don't have like a this you can like push a button just like make a website that like I want a dinosaur website and it'll just like write a whole dinosaur website. But it's got nothing original on it. And so when an LLM is reading the content, consuming the content, there's two problems that come up. One is if it's using like a web framework like Vue or React or whatever, what it actually sees is not the content. It sees the JavaScript application that would be running in your browser that would then show you content. And it has to make a decision. Is it worth it for me to run this or not? And most of the time it goes, nah, and it just doesn't. So it never sees the content. It just sees the JS. It goes, throws it away. If it does run it and it starts getting the content, as it's reading the content, when it's in training mode, it'll start saying, well, okay, so I've seen these tokens up to this point. What's the next token likely to be? It'll make its own prediction. And if the token that actually occurs is what it predicted or is close to what it predicted, it goes, well, that's very low perplexity, which means it's only reinforcing the learned model that I've already got. So I don't need this is like low quality data. It's probably LLM generated is what it winds up concluding. Um, when it encounters our stuff, we have our own way of phrasing things. We've got kind of our own internal lexicon for a whole ton of different ideas. Um, Everything from novel structures in our system that we had to have words for, so we made them up, to social structures we've discussed, kind of like the idiocracy thing where like Moses was not sure. Um, Phrases like that never have occurred anywhere else, and so the AI is constantly surprised, and that makes it rate the source very high because it's both coherent and it's high perplexity in terms of next token following. So
And
yeah, that's
actually,
been
to your point, something interesting that I found writing the unwhite paper is I wanted to make it readable by anybody. So I would give it to Claude and to Grok and ask Claude and Grok. I would tell them, you are 18 to 40-year-old person of above average intelligence and high school leaver. Please read this and tell me what you found hard. And when it was relaying things back to me, it would consistently make mistakes that were related to what it expected to see next. So
Hmm.
it would constantly refer to the Gajumaru as infrastructure. And I kept saying, no, the
Right.
Gajumaru is not an infrastructure. It's an architectural model that has within it a resource layer that then connects infrastructure. And that it never got. It never could get that into its head. A little bit like I posted this on LinkedIn about a year and a half ago. I was trying to draw the analogy that I was writing. I've written tons of things that I've never published, um, in part because there was never a platform that I thought I could publish on. I know Substack is there, but it's not the same as scrolling notes and so on. Anyway, I was trying to draw an analogy for people to get the idea of why Bitcoin and Ethereum were great proofs of concept, but they didn't actually work. And the thing I hit upon in my head
Hmm.
was, okay, well, they're like square wheels. And so people have tried to turn them into polygons by cheating and having so-called layer twos, which actually don't really work and are highly centralized. But pardon the pun for polygon. But I went to ChatGPT to get a picture to convey this because they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it could not draw square wheels. It could make everything in the picture square apart from the wheels. They were the one. I mean, it could put squares inside the wheels. It just couldn't put the wheel to be square. So I gave it a picture of a bike with square wheels that an artist in the Netherlands had created. I then gave it a video with screenshots of I forget the guys' names. They were a kind of a a crazy experiment group in the US who used to be on Discovery Channel, and they did this experiment to find out how fast you had to drive a pickup truck with square wheels before it stabilized and
Oof.
became, yeah, before it became like being on round wheels. So the answer was 120 something miles an hour.
God, I bet that was kind of fun, but spooky.
Yeah. Um, anyway, I gave ChatGPT all these prompts, all these bits of information. I said, now you understand what a square wheel is. Yes, I do. And blah, blah, it would come up with a wheel with a square truck.
Right.
It just no, but this is the thing. So the point you're talking about perplexity actually is very true because all of my experiences dealing with AI, I'm not saying that AI is useless. I'm not in that camp. I think it has its uses. It certainly is good to try and it is very good at suggesting pathways to simplification of language, which I think so even when I've read out even when I talk to people about our videos, they tell me that they're way too complex and that we talk in terms that are very inaccessible, which is a headache because that's not our intention. And when
Mhm.
I'm trying to write, I'm trying to write in a way that is accessible, is conscious of that idea. So this is where I found them very useful. But it could never write the thing out de novo, not ever, because everything that it has been trained on is vast amounts of output, which is the only thing that layer ones and layer twos have ever been good at, is marketing. And they've put tons of it into the world, which all these LLMs are trained on. And of course, everything we say is the antithesis of what they've said. Even the
Right.
the Buterin blockchain trilemma, which I threw out, I think it's chapter 19. I just go, no, that's complete self-serving trash. Let me show you a real triangle. It's trustlessness, efficiency, accountability. Anyway, gone a long way off topic. Coming back to the
Never.
yeah, sorry. I know it's very late your time, so forgive me. I'll wrap this up quickly. What we've done in everything, and I say we, you guys have built all of this stuff out. My kind of contribution was the infrastructure connecting to a resource and all that infrastructure being owned by the people who run it. You guys did all the other pieces within that, and something that has been a North Star for all of you all the time, to the point that I think Ulf has it tattooed on his body somewhere, is the CIR whore speech about complexity and simplicity. And what that really boils down to is the separation of concerns, the separation of issues, and deal with things separately. And if you look at anything in the world and you see separate issues being conflated, the reason for it is usually to create the famous moat that so-called venture capitalists in Silicon Valley love so much, because by creating all of these aggregations of pieces, you actually make something quite unassailable from a business perspective, because you're
Mm.
quite willing to take massive losses here, here, and here just so you can make some money here, which then becomes a really hard leap for
I'm
anybody new to make.
I'm still in awe of discovering how much of a moat some sneaky folks kind of went to a ton of trouble to get, you know, push hard politically on all kinds of weird regulation stuff, and then they just built the best moat ever for us, which is like, I guess, thanks, but um, that's wild. But it comes from this dynamic of kind of like not, I guess it's a rent seeking sort of impulse where
Yeah,
they're
it's
like,
look,
oh, well, we'll regulate the competition out of existence, and then everything's ours, which is nuts.
it's not just that. It's yeah, that's where they go when they get a little bit bigger, and we saw that with the I'd gone over to Washington for the Trump inauguration, and I was hoping to get an invite to the blockchain conference that then followed with, I forget who it was that was hosting it. Um, I think they got a picture with Trump, but I'm not sure he was involved in the actual. I'm pretty certain he wasn't involved in the actual conversation. And we subsequently heard about what had gone on in that conversation from somebody else, and I wrote a little spiel essentially saying corporatism, corporatism, corporatism. Every single thing was, let's find a trap door and pull it up behind us and
Hmm.
just pretend that we are decentralized, and do
Hmm.
that in such a way that it allows us to have this decentralization theater, which means we can have some efficiency, but absolutely no accountability whatsoever.
The fact that no
Um,
one's layering the problem the way that we have, like, it's well, this goes right back to separation of concern. The fact that that's not a thing that's happened anywhere else is really surprising to me. I keep
well,
thinking that like we just do the most obvious thing at every step possible, and so someone's going to come up with this next, and then like nobody ever does.
I look at when I finish part four and I get the layer one analysis in there, and I get a few of the case studies in there. I know the guys are working on the black paper for the Ethereum ecosystem.
Hmm.
I intend to send them to every regulator I can find an email address for, and just say, you are now on notice. You have no excuse ever again to turn a blind eye to decentralized theatrics. Um, because
Yeah, there's going to be some big I told you so's.
some
With it,
colossal ones. I had someone message me the other day saying that the SEC, or is it FINRA, I can't remember which, have said that quite a few activities. So there's this is another topic another day. Basically, the SEC slash FINRA are behaving one way and the FCA another, and I think both have got it wrong for different reasons. But that's a whole other conversation. It's super nerdy as well. Um, Anyway, by the by, the thing of it is, at the heart of everything that we've always striven to deliver is this idea that you separate concerns, you separate issues. So an obvious one in that context was grids, because it separates
Mhm.
out the key issues, and that then led to various other directions you might take this in. And the question comes, how could we address the vulnerability in the credit card system and the payment system? And if it's a payment system where you're logging into your bank and you're saying, please send my wife $1,000, yen, euros, whatever, that's a relatively contained problem that grids can address immediately in exactly the same way that it does on Gajumaru mining, as I showcased in the little demo video.
Mhm.
You log into the secure area using grids. You don't have a login and password. You confirm that you wish to do a transaction that you've created the instruction for. You sign the instruction. And again, works perfectly. It's a very easy connection. When you start looking at how do we do most of our online transactions, it's not just the retailer side of that, which is, do you have an account with us? No, you can do it without needing an account, but most people end up with accounts. You then have all these threat vectors coming up, and you look at the card system and you think, okay, well, how could grids help you? Well, maybe the 3DS piece could be a help. Maybe that can work. And then, as we both said, you end up in this rabbit hole where you say, well, why do you have the credit cards in the first place? Surely you should just link them to your public key. And your
Mhm.
public key is something you can authenticate. Nobody has to know, as you put it, they don't need to know that you have the appropriate passport,
It
utility bill, etc.
Yeah, it makes writing the backend system so much nicer too, because you don't have to worry about like, you know, oh no, what if somebody steals our customer data, but we only have their public key, so who cares? Like, there's not,
Mm.
like none of it's a now. There's still gonna be some private like user data or whatever, depending on what you're doing. But being able to get rid of the burden of username password combinations for one, and then our system never has to touch a credit card number ever, not even in like an inset frame from some other web service or whatever. And then we're always worried that browsers are going to have some weird like peek through, iframe workaround attack or some cross site, CSS vulnerability that our web framework wasn't done, or we just rebuilt our stupid React website and there's an npm attack, and so it's just actually siphoning data that anybody enters anywhere. And you don't know because you can't. There's like 19,000 dependencies just for Hello World in that. So are you going to check them all? Because like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
Um, that's it's We just have the craziest stack of garbage, and the only way to deal with the garbage world is to not put anything valuable in the garbage. And
but most
this
of
is a
that
way to do
garbage
that.
evolved because they were trying to get essentially
Yeah, yeah.
a dog to do a horse's job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
um, rather than say, "Hey, you know what? This is a dog. We need a horse. Let's build a horse." They just continue to layer things on top until it stopped being a dog and wasn't very good at being a horse either.
yeah.
Um,
They made a bunch of laggers.
yeah. So in the context, then, what we're talking about, actually, somebody opens, uh, they get a grids system set up, which would be Gaju Desk right now. When they go into Gaju Desk, they create an account. That account then has a public key. They can share that public key with anybody, and they can authenticate transactions through that process. So somebody like Visa, MasterCard, or a bank issuer or a payment service provider could actually connect their unique identifiers to that public key.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take that? Just explain that a bit further, and then we'll bring it to a
Well, it's
close.
for from the payment service provider or the vendor, whoever it is you're talking to. um if you've already got an account with them, then you've already got a way to authenticate with them. Adding a key to that account, sort of a cluster of data, is super unambiguous. You authenticate with them the way that you've been doing it up to now, then they give you a random message that can't be repeated. Give a random message to sign. You sign that data, send it back to them. That signature return has your public key and the data that you signed and the signature, and it all goes back in a blob, and they can verify it right then. The first time they see that key, they go, "Oh, well, that's this dude's key, obviously, because this is where we are." In fact, the message they're signing can be they're going to sign a time-stamped message that has your user ID in it. So, like,
Yeah,
make this
it could
totally
also have to be
unambiguous.
content data points. So, for example, it could say
Mhm.
buying from pennies.
Well, that's during a
Buy,
transaction. I just mean to add the very first step of adding, like, how does Visa know that this is me?
Mhm,
Like the very first step, I can sign my username with a timestamp or whatever, and it's completely unambiguous. And from
mhm.
that point on, what's it mean for a vendor to request authentication of a specific action? Well, the thing being signed, like you said, it can be the details of the action, or a hash of the details of the action if we want to anonymize it. So there's only one way to get to that hash, which is through all these details. And that, that could be, that's an implementation detail from the perspective of how the technology works. But it's completely unambiguous. There doesn't have to be, nobody has to handle any scary data at all, except in the back end. I mean, you don't want
Yeah,
Visa's back end to get cracked, but
the thing is, when you look at it like that, I was asked this question the other day, and I gave the example of Bank of America. So I said it was a guy in Texas. So I said, so you want to send $1,000 to your mother in El Paso? You log in to the Bank of America site. That means you're going into a secure area. Now, that secure area has to be on their server. So they have to still have your data, your name, address, all that information. But the only access point to it that is external facing is this public key facility. That's it. There is no other way. It GRIDS.
right.
There is no other way to make that connection externally. That's how
Mhm.
you kill the threat vector.
In
And
fact,
say,
on I believe it's true on both of the. No. Okay, we have a few input fields on Gajumaru.com, but if you go to Gaju Market, there's no place to even input text anywhere right now until we do the search features later. But there'll be a search box that you can type into, but there's no inputs anywhere in the system until you've already done an authentication. And that makes the security model very easy to reason about. Thank goodness. Um,
yeah.
that's just a huge you know, there's a bunch of dumb web stuff that you got to get right because the web's crazy. But I mean, that pack of madness, it's at least well understood madness. But that pack of crazy stuff aside, you don't have to worry about oh, what do we do about people doing repeated trying to log in 10,000 times per second to just iterate through passwords or something. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Throttling, you just don't really worry about most of that stuff
Yeah,
that you
so
normally would.
what you'd end up with is a state where your public key becomes your credit card from an online perspective. You will still
Mhm.
have a credit card for using in the physical world, and that's not our concern. That's not our issue. The
Mhm.
point is that, and
Well, with
actually
Capture Mobile, you
that
can
becomes,
still they could use the exact same payment method, like because we've got these these terminal integrations now where, well, at least where I live, where we could write an app spec that would do the exact same thing that you would get online at the register. Now there's
which
things
would
we want to
actually
do
remove
beyond
the
that.
need for the card altogether, because then your phone
Yeah,
becomes the
that's
card.
my point. It can't get stolen if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, perfect. So the thing is, and goes right back to about an hour ago when you said the question, I have no idea how I put that into a deck. And that's exactly what I've been struggling with, because I want to tell all these people, I want to go to Visa and MasterCard and say, hey, this is actually something that completely transforms your model, um, and not in a bad way. It's like that "are you sitting down" thing, where you want to give someone the bad news and then the good news. And the
Mhm.
good news is, well, actually, you do these things incredibly well. And if you stop trying to get hallucinogens to do it for you, you could just focus on doing that unbelievably well, which is fraud detection and prevention. And you should
Mhm.
charge all of the people involved in the system for that service in much the same way that you charged them in the past for providing the payment routing.
There's what we're doing with other payment services and things. Those are very immediate. Uh, if you, let's say you pay the register with GajuPay instead of a credit card, that's done. You better hope the vendor is when you want to register for a refund, right? That has to go through a process on their side to pay you back. There's nobody in the middle. There's a lot of business opportunity for somebody to be in the middle of that. So integrating with this on the fiat side opens the door to integrate with us on the blockchain side, and bringing things like fraud prevention to blockchain services. I I think we're the only chain anywhere that can actually open a space for that, just structurally, that we have the ability to do that. That's huge, really, really huge. So be Integrating with that on the fiat side opens this really good door to moving into the crypto side, but going into the crypto side lets them focus on their main service provision, their money making part, where they get to charge fees for doing something that actually adds value.
I think it goes back to this moat thing of everybody's focused on how do I exclude everybody else rather than how do I stay ahead of everyone else, which are two different questions.
Mhm.
Um, Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, they've all got what Visa? No, the first one was Diners Card, right? And Diners Card was 1950s. Am I right?
I don't know the history.
My guess is they've got 60 to 80 years of data and experience and knowledge that they can apply to understanding where the vectors of these things are. So if you want to look at a large language model, they have some of the biggest, best you can possibly imagine when it comes to any and all of these things.
Mm.
To your point, this is where they focus their USP, and it's where it'll be extraordinarily hard for anyone else to catch up with them ever again.
Mhm.
Any parting thoughts before we close down for the night?
Uh, no, I think there's a really good. I didn't think about this in the context of credit card numbers being a thing that still exists, but this is like a pretty obvious case where not just that we have a thing that fixes the why do we have credit card numbers still a problem, but that has a very long fat tail that's good for these particular providers. So I think this is actually really good. It's a fit. It's a good fit in terms of like integrating a good solution, and that integration leads to better things going on. Not just this one problem, but leads to good things for that industry as a whole. I think that's really, yeah, that's a really good one.
Well,
I wish I'd
Craig,
thought of it, but I get no credit for this one because I didn't come up with it. That's a perfectly your thought while trying to buy a phone case came into this, and it's great that happened.
well, it's nice to get credit for once too, because normally
Yeah,
I just have to point at you guys and go, no, no, that's them, that's them.
no, that
Anyway,
like putting these two together, I didn't think of that at all, and it's really like it's funny now in retro. It's just like a lot of good ideas that float around the team, right? In retrospect, you're like, that is silly. Why do we even? Why is
yeah.
everybody still doing this at all?
But look, the thing of it is, it was fresh in my mind because I've been writing all these letters to different people, legislators, regulators, banks, payment service providers, critical infrastructure providers. It goes back to Salt Typhoon. About a year and a half ago, a guy contacted us about Salt Typhoon and said, could GRIDS solve for that? And I said, well, yes, insofar as that when you initiate the conversation between 2 points, you authenticate that way. What you don't do is you don't have like a telephone call where the whole thing there's no grids doing the whole telephone call. It's initiating the call. You could have it
Right,
there.
right. It's that kickoff point.
It's initiating the email, and the guy didn't understand that. That he thought that the whole thing had to be secure. He didn't understand that if the access point to the conversation doesn't exist anywhere but between the parties to it, that it's not hackable. But
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway, Craig, thank you. Good night.
All
God
right.
bless all. Bye bye.
Take care.